Hello, this video will be a white openings tier list for intermediate rated players. For this tier list, I'm assuming intermediate or early advanced rated players are roughly between the ratings of 1000 and 1650 on chess.com. I'm assuming players at this range can reliably know 5-ish moves of theory per line, and anything beyond that is pretty unreliable, or they're just automatically playing moves without knowing why. I'm also assuming they can handle maybe the top 3 or so most common responses that they see. They're typically not going to be as well prepared for the 4th, 5th, or 6th most common responses. And I'm also assuming that gambits at this level are still able to work reliably. It's not universal that players at this rating are going to be busting every single gambit. Because of these reasons, compared to the beginner rating tier list, we're able to play some more theory-heavy openings, and also able to play some openings that are more ambitious, while also being a little riskier because I'm assuming that players at this rating are more capable of handling that risk. Next up is the Bishop's Opening, which follows after e4, e5, and then bishop to c4, which is not a very good opening because white can simply just develop the knight to f6 and then play c6 and d5, making the bishop on c4 look pretty stupid. I mean, I think a lot of players at this level are going to know the idea that I just explained. There's not really any upside to playing this opening either. There's not really tricks to it. I put it in the trash tier in my beginner tier list. I think it's even worse in this rating range, so Bishop's Opening is an easy trash tier. The first opening we're looking at is the center game, which for white follows after e4, e5, and then d4. I believe the traditional center game follows with pawn takes pawn, queen takes pawn, and then knight c6. If you play the center game this way, I think this is complete trash, and there's no reason you should play this. If you're playing this in order to play c3, known as the Danish Gambit, I think the Danish Gambit is pretty good and playable. So that's hard to rate it. The Danish Gambit being you want to gambit the c-pawn in order to develop your knight and have a lead in development. I'm going to rate the center game, assuming that it's to play the Danish Gambit. I'm assuming that they're not playing the center game to play queen takes pawn. If you're playing the Danish Gambit, I think the center game / Danish Gambit is a good opening at this level. I think a lot of players will be caught off guard with this, and you can get a lot of early wins playing this opening. Next up is the Vienna Game, which follows after e4, e5, and knight to c3. The idea is you want to play pawn to f4. For example, if the move knight f6 comes out, you can already play f4, known as the Vienna Gambit. Because if pawn takes, we have e5, and the knight has nowhere to go, and we'll be able to get the big center. I put this in the S tier in my beginner list, and I think it's still an S tier at this rating range as well. It's just one of your best attacking options early. You also have the option of playing bishop c4, d3, and then f4. There's just a lot of good attacking plans. It's very easy to learn. It's just a great weapon all around at all rating ranges. Next up is the Ponziani Opening, which follows after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and then c3 in order to set up pawn to d4. The Ponziani Opening is a very decent choice at this rating range, actually. Objectively, not as good as the Vienna or the Italian, but given that a lot of players at this range won't be as prepared, I think there's good upside to it. I'm considering low S tier, higher good tier. I'll actually put it at S tier. I think this is a really serious weapon. If you are a player that likes to catch people off guard right out of the opening, I think the Ponziani is a really good choice. Next up, we have the Four Knights game, which follows after e4, e5, and then there's a few move orders, but it's defined by all the knights being developed. There's a few ways to play for white. You can either try to set up d4, and there's also something known as the Colle System, which plays g3 and then tries to play bishop to g2, fianchettoing. I think this opening is a lot better at this rating range than it is in the beginner tier. If you're willing to play the more complicated stuff like the Colle System. I struggle to put it in S tier because it's pretty common. I think top of good tier is pretty fair for this. It's just a little, the Colle System's not super easy to play. It's pretty positional, but otherwise, it's still an opening that's perfectly playable at this range, so I'll put it in top of good. Next up, we have the Scotch Opening, which follows after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and d4. The way I recommend playing it is if pawn takes d4, we play bishop to c4, known as the Scotch Gambit. Again, the Scotch is very good and very tricky at this level still. I mean, I still see the Scotch Gambit tricking players at this rating range all the time. So I think it's still worthy of being an S tier opening at this level. So I think it's good. Good enough for S tier. Next up is the Italian game. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and bishop c4. Typically, a game plan for white is to try to play c3 and then d4 in these openings. Sometimes they can play d4 immediately as well. The Italian game is still an amazing opening at this level. I think it's still an easy S tier. It was the top beginner opening on that tier list, and I think it's still a very good opening at this level as well. So any beginners out there who are playing the Italian game, feel safe knowing that it's a great long-term weapon still. Next up, we have the Ruy Lopez, which follows after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and bishop to b5. I mean, there's a lot of different lines in the Ruy Lopez, so it's hard to say exactly the ideas. The main line goes with like a6, bishop a4, knight f6, knight c3. I mean, there's like a million different lines in the Ruy Lopez. It's hard to kind of say one main idea. So this is kind of a funny one because I think in my beginner list, I put the Ruy Lopez in good. But in this list, I'm actually going to put it in too much theory, which seems weird. But let me try to explain. The problem is that intermediate players, let's pretend we're black here. Intermediate players are going to be more prepared for the Ruy Lopez than players who are beginners. So when we see the Ruy Lopez at this rating range, it's a lot more common they're going to be playing main lines, like pawn to a6 and then knight f6. And if you're playing the Ruy Lopez and you're seeing these testing responses, you just have to have so many lines prepared. I don't think it's worth it at this level, to be honest. So I think the Ruy Lopez has to just go in too much theory at this level. Once you get to that like advanced range of like 1700 plus, then you can start learning it. But I still wouldn't recommend players in this range touch this opening. Next up, we have the Scandinavian main line, which is e4, d5, pawn takes pawn, queen takes pawn, knight c3. I mean, this is the best response against the Scandinavian, in my opinion, and objectively. So, I mean, this is an easy S tier. Like, this should just be in almost everyone's opening repertoire by this level. The Scandinavian is common enough that, as white, we should have an opening prepared against the Scandinavian. So, I think the main line is an S tier. There's no question. It's common enough that we need to be prepared against it. So Scandi Triangle was on the last list. I still don't know what it is, so I'm just going to quickly throw it in trash, just because I've never heard of it, and no one's corrected me to this point, so I'm just putting it in trash. Next up, we have the Colle Sicilian, which is after e4, c5 in the Sicilian, and then knight to c3, typically looking to play the moves pawn to d3, pawn to g3, and bishop to g2. So this opening was too much theory in the beginner list. Here, I think it starts to become playable. It's a good opening for sure. It was too much theory for beginners because you have to understand a lot of positional ideas. But I think this is the level where you're ready to start exploring those closed positional systems like this one. So I would put this as a good opening. Okay, next is the Grand Prix Attack, which follows after the Colle Sicilian, e4, c5, knight c3. Move 2 doesn't really matter from black. We're always going to be playing f4. Idea being we're going to develop like this, castle, and then pawn storm, trying to checkmate black on the king side. It's a very aggressive attacking opening, and it's actually been my personal main weapon against the Sicilian for many years. I will throw this at the top of S tier. I have scored insanely well against the Sicilian with the Grand Prix Attack at this level. A lot of players playing the Sicilian are just not prepared for this line. They're just preparing against the open. And if you prepare in this line, you're going to score extremely good results playing the Grand Prix Attack. I think this goes at the top of S tier. It's easy to learn, fun to play. You'll get a lot of early checkmates. Nothing else I can say. This is what I think is one of the best intermediate openings, period. Next up is the Alapin Sicilian, which follows after e4, c5, and then pawn to c3. Idea to play d4 and try to have 2 pawns in the center. The Alapin was I rated as the best opening against the Sicilian for beginners. I still think it's very good at this level. It just falls off slightly. The Alapin, I'll put at the top of good. The Grand Prix Attack is objectively better and way more ambitious at the cost of being a little bit more theory heavy. But at this level, you're ready for that. So I think this is a good example of the difference between how I rank beginner and intermediate openings. Okay, next up we have the Rossolimo Attack. Again in the Sicilian after e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, and then bishop to b5 is the starting position of the Rossolimo Attack. The idea being that you want to trade off this knight and try to ruin black's pawn structure before putting all your pawns back on light squares. So this opening, I think, is really good at this level. I think this is another opening choice to really catch people off guard in the Sicilian. I like it less than the Grand Prix Attack, but I'm a little biased. I'll put this at the bottom of S tier. I think it's an excellent choice against the Sicilian as well. So it's definitely more rare than Grand Prix Attack, but in my experience, people even up to 2000 aren't super prepared against the Grand Prix Attacks. So Rossolimo, still an excellent choice if you prefer a more solid and positional approach to a game. Okay, and next is the Open Sicilian, which is defined by, in the Sicilian, white playing the moves knight to f3, and then d4 in order to trade the pawns in the center. This one's hard to rate. So every single player as black that you face playing the Sicilian is going to be prepared with something against the Open Sicilian. That is just a fact. If you're really, really willing to study the Open Sicilian, it is objectively the best choice, which is why grandmasters always play it. But it's hard to say that players at this level will be that well prepared in every single line in the Sicilian. I'll put it at the top of good. It's obviously a really good choice. It just takes a lot of memorization to play this successfully. But you're still at a level here where you are totally capable of outstudying everybody in every line in the Open Sicilian and winning that way. That's totally a viable way to climb. So I think it's S tier, depending on the type of player. I think it's just good, top of good tier overall. Even if you don't know all the perfect theory, you'll still get decent playable positions. So I think it'll go top of good tier. Next up is the exchanged French, which happens in the French line and is known by exchanging the pawns. I mean, it's objectively okay. It's just super drawish, and I don't think players at this level should be happy drawing every game as white. Really, as white, we should be playing for wins at this level, so I think this is a good definition of a bad but playable opening. Even a dead even position at this level is still okay. So if you're a player that really, really doesn't want to study theory and you're totally fine just having a dead even position, this is fine to play if you want something low maintenance for your repertoire. But for a student who wants to really win a lot against the French, I wouldn't recommend this. Next up, we have the advanced French, which instead of exchanging, we advance the pawn with e5. The advanced French is objectively one of the best options. So it's got to go in S tier. Really, it's about what specific choice you want to play against the French, but I think this is a good contender to go in almost anybody's opening repertoire as white, assuming they play 1e4. But yeah, objectively, the advanced French is one of the best lines you can play against the French defense. Next up, we have the mainline French, which in the French defense, we play knight to c3. And then there's like a ton of different branches. They can go bishop to b4, they can go knight e6, they can go knight e7. There's a lot of different stuff here. I mean, just given what I just said there, it's too much theory. There's so many branches in this line. And given that we're only seeing the French defense maybe 8% of the time, this shouldn't be something we have to devote that much theory into. So I think it's a too much theory opening for this level still. Next up, we have the Tarrasch French, which instead of the main line knight to c3, we play knight to d2. cutting out a bunch of theory because bishop to b4 can now just be met by pawn to c3. This is a lot more aggressive of a line than most of the other Frenches. There's a couple lines where you're able to sacrifice a pawn for development and get an attack. I think the Tarrasch French is on par with the advanced French at this level and is a worthy contender of being a part of your opening repertoire against the French if you play 1e4. So look into this opening if you're an attacking player like myself. Next, we have the exchange Caro-Kann, which in the Caro-Kann is defined by exchanging the pawns. This is kind of the same as the exchange French. It's fine, but it's just drawish. So if you want something low maintenance, it's okay. But a lot of the other lines are just much more ambitious if you're willing to study a bit. Next, we have the Panov Attack in the Caro-Kann, which after the exchange variation, we play pawn to c4. Now this is a lot better than just playing the normal exchange Caro-Kann. And I think players at this level are capable of learning this if they want. I think it's not quite as good as some of the other choices, but I think it's a very good option, so I'm going to put it in good. Next up, we have the advanced line of the Caro-Kann, which in the Caro-Kann is defined by playing pawn to e5, pushing the pawn. One of my favorite lines in the advanced Caro-Kann is if black plays bishop to f5, we can play pawn to h4, and some players will unknowingly play e6 and trap their bishop as early as move 7. I think the advanced Caro-Kann is the best choice, or one of the best choices against the Caro-Kann, so this is an easy S tier contender. Next up, we have the mainline Caro-Kann, defined by playing in the Caro-Kann knight to c3. This is okay. It's a good opening, but I think a lot of the other choices are way more fun and give way more chances to win, so I'm going to put that in good, but I think the advanced Caro and some of the other lines are just way more fun to play. Next up, we have the f3 line of the Caro-Kann, known as the fantasy variation, where we play f3, and sometimes white unknowingly ends up in a bad position by playing something like bishop g4 and e6 and just giving white a big center. I think the fantasy Caro is a contender for being the best choice along with the advance. You're kind of picking between these two, if you're asking me, for which one's the best. I think the advance is, or at least the advance is what I personally mained for a long time, but the fantasy, I know a lot of people that have had good success with this at this level, so I'll put that in S tier as well. Okay, and next we have the knight f3 setup versus the Pirc, where in playing the Pirc defense, we are going to play the move knight to f3 and go for this kind of symmetrical setup. This is a good choice. Almost anything you play against a Pirc defense is okay. I think the other choices are a lot more ambitious and also not too hard to learn. But this is still a good choice, assuming you haven't learned something yet that you can play pretty intuitively without having to study, so I'll put that in bottom of good. Next is the f4 setup against the Pirc, which in the Pirc defense we're going to play pawn to f4, which is sometimes known as the 3 pawns attack or the Austrian attack. This is a really good choice against the Pirc defense. It's genuinely one of the reasons the Pirc defense is not played at the Grandmaster level. Because of that, I think it's got to go in S tier. Players at this level are perfectly ready and able to play this opening. It's not really that theory heavy. So if you've seen the Pirc defense enough and you want to start crushing it, this is a good choice to look into. Next is the F3 setup versus the Pirc, which instead of F4, we're going to play pawn to F3. And the idea being we're going to play moves like bishop E3, pawn D2, queenside castling, and then we're going to try to trade off this bishop and then pawn storm and attack the king, trying to open up this rook. I think this is gotta be one of the best openings at this level. And I'll tell you why. The Pirc defense is very, very common by players in the roughly 14 to 1600 level. And if you play this against the Pirc defense, you're going to score like 70 to 80% wins. You're going to crush everybody who plays this, and it's very common. So once you get to this intermediate range, add this to your repertoire and start just scoring super free wins against the Pirc defense every single time. This is sometimes it's called the 150 attack or the 1500 attack. It was nicknamed that because this was an opening played by a lot of players in clubs who are roughly 1500 on average. And this attack was known to just always crush those club players. So if you're looking to consistently crush 1500 rated players, look at the F3 setup versus the Pirc. Next up is the Queen's Gambit, which follows after d4, d5, pawn to c4. Idea being to try to gambit the queenside pawn in order to play with two pawns in the center. This is a really good opening. And at this level, I think players are ready to start exploring this. It was too heavy on theory for beginners, in my opinion. But starting at this level, you're really starting to explore the more tricky openings and the more theory-heavy stuff. Queen's Gambit's got to go in S tier. It's a weapon used by tons of players at this rating range and above, so really good S tier opening. I'm going to even maybe put it close to the top. I'll put it up there, like really close to the top of this list. Next up is the London system, which follows after d4. And it's a system-based opening, so we don't care what black does. We're pretty much always playing moves that look something roughly like this. Yeah, it's really system-based. I kind of had a rant about this opening in my beginner list. And I think it's even worse at this level. There's really no reason you should play this at this level. But I know tons of players that do. I'm tempted to throw it in trash, but it's not actually that bad. I'll put it in bad but playable. It's pretty much the same, in my opinion, as all these exchange lines where you're choosing to play something with very little theory that's super unambitious and chill. Which, if you really want to climb beyond this rating, you got to start playing ambitious stuff that you got to learn. So I'll put it in bad but playable. Next up is the Colle System, which is pretty much the same as the London system, but we're not going to get our bishop out before we play the move pawn to e3. So it's an even more passive version of the London. And given how I rated the London, a passive London will have to just go in trash tier for my list. Next up is the Trompowsky Attack, which is defined by playing d4, black playing knight f6, and white playing bishop to g5. I think this is a really good choice at this range. I think the only issue is maybe that pawn to d5 is still more common than knight to f6. I think because of that, I'm thinking of putting it in not practical, because you still have to have something against d4, d5 if you're going to play this. If you have something against d4, d5, this could be an S tier contender. But just given that d4, d5 is more common, I think this just goes in not practical. Next up is the Torre Attack. Close to the Trompowsky, d4, knight f6, first knight f3, and then playing the move bishop to g5. Again, I think this is just not practical for the same reasons as the Trompowsky. That, and you have to have another move, so I think it's pretty hard to get this consistently at this rating range. Next up, we have the Catalan Opening, which stems out of the Queen's Gambit declined, and typically white plays g3 at some point, bishop to g2, and tries to put pressure on the d5 pawn, with moves like knight to c3, and maybe queen to b3 as well. I think the Catalan is another excellent choice to be as a main opening. A little hard to get it consistently. I still think it goes towards the bottom of S tier. Like, you'll get it a lot. It may not be like 50%, but it's enough where you can study this and get it in like 30% plus of your games. So I think it's a really good choice. Next up, we have the English Attack, which is just defined by playing the move pawn to c4 on move 1. The English Attack is really, really good. You'll be surprised how many people don't prepare against it as black at this rating range. I mean, I didn't have a weapon against it until well over 2000, so if you're prepared with this line at this level, you are very dangerous. I gotta put it pretty high in S tier. I'll put it up here. Next up is the Reti Opening, defined by playing the move knight to f3 on move 1, eventually pawn g3 and bishop g2. This is okay. It's pretty passive for white. At this rating range, you can kind of get away with it. I'll put this like bottom of good tier. It's okay. Next up, we have 1g3. Of course, known by playing the move pawn to g3 on move 1. Pretty much same as the Reti Opening. It's okay, just pretty passive. Next up, we have the King's Indian Attack. A few ways we can get to this, but usually happens with something like this move order. It's pretty system-based, so you're really looking more at just like where the pieces are located. At this rating range, we're going to be playing moves like we're going to look to try to like push, expand, possibly play knight e1 and pawn to f4 in order to open up this way. King's Indian Attack is really good at this rating range. It's just a little hard to get it consistently in good positions. I think top of good tier is a very fair spot for it. Next up is the Larsen Opening, defined by playing the move pawn to b3 on move 1. This opening, I think it'll go the same spot as like Reti and g3. Same reasons as before with those openings. Next is the Van Geet Opening, which plays knight to c3 on move 1. Again, same reasons as before. I'll just put this at bottom of good. Okay, and these next three openings I'm going to group together. The bird, the orangutan, and the grob are one f4, one b4, and one g4, respectively. I don't think I need to say much about these. These are all kind of bad. The bird is the only one that has some value to it. I'll actually slide the bird up to bad but playable. There's some tricky move orders, like if we see e5, we can play e4 and transpose into a king's gambit. We can also try to trick them if they play like pawn d4 with other gambits like this. So there's actually some value to playing pawn d4, or f4 rather. G4 and b4, those are terrible, so I'll do the quick ratings like that for this part. And that's it for this tier list. I think you might notice there's a lot of openings in the S tier, and that's because a lot of these openings are against different responses from black. And at this rating range, you have to start preparing against everything that you can see. So really, your repertoire has to be pretty ready against everything. If you enjoyed this tier list, please let me know by commenting, and subscribing. Let me know what kind of videos you want in the future. Other than that, good luck in your future chess games, have a good rest of your day, and goodbye.